talk already this week, but you know we love that Duke basketball program. Jon Scheyer and company are getting set for the 2024-2025 season. They're making headlines. They're getting excited for the upcoming season, and I think this Duke basketball team is set to be pretty special. Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. So great to have you here with us on Thursday, September 19th, 2024. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. We've talked a lot about the Duke football team and their 3-0 start to the year. A big game coming up this weekend against Middle Tennessee State. But today we talk about Duke basketball. Jon Scheyer recently appearing on John Rothstein's podcast, had some interesting quotes and comments about the team, about future scheduling. We've also got some recruiting updates to give you, and who better to have this discussion with than our good pal Kevin Conley from Durham. So really fired up to get going here once again today. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Anytime you take the time to leave us those reviews, so greatly appreciative of that. You can watch the show each and every day on YouTube. Like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to our YouTube channel, comment down below if you're an everydayer. I love those everydayers for being a part of this Duke community. All right, and now we'll bring in our good pal Kevin Conley, who's back with us once again, man. And yeah, we look at the calendar and we're in the heart of football season, loving it so far. But man, I tell you, Kevin, I cannot wait until we get this Duke basketball season up and running. I hope that you're doing well, my friend.
I am doing well, JJ. And yeah, it's going to be exciting, man. I feel like the anticipation just continues to build with every week we get closer, really to the end of September, because that's when it feels like that October 1st date with Countdown to Craziness and a couple exhibitions feels like that's the unofficial start to the basketball season.
Yeah, so it's going to be here soon. This Duke basketball team has had a lot of time to work over the summer. We've had recent NCAA rule changes over the past couple of seasons where these coaches are actually able to get more time on the court with their team, which is, really important when you have the roster turnover that you have each and every year. And it's crazy to think that we did used to live in a world where it really wasn't until the past several weeks that you would get more and more activity with your squad going into the new season. But fortunately for Duke, by and large, they had almost everybody with them throughout the course of the entire summer, and the NCAA allows them to kind of dive into those practice settings.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And obviously you had guys leaving at certain points of the summer to go do their other obligations, which is fine for summer. But then once you hit the fall semester, everyone's locked in and they're there all the time. And it seems like this team is healthy at this moment, and obviously that can change in an instant, but you continue to knock on wood and cross your fingers and all that. But as you mentioned, it's almost necessary that the NCAA had to change those rules to allow coaches to be on the court a lot more often, because teams are built now in the transfer portal. It's not like you're retaining 75 to 80% of your roster on a given season. You're bringing guys in from all over the place with all different skill sets and all different backgrounds and experience of coming from other schools. So it's certainly good that coaches are able to be on the court and work with these guys during the summer and into the fall before the official start of practice begins in, I think, just a couple of weeks now.
Yeah, the advantage of that is just so great to be able to see what these guys look like blending together with one another. Jon Scheyer, and we've made it a point to talk about, there are 10 new faces with this Duke basketball team. Really only 2 scholarship guys make the return, and Tyrese Proctor and Caleb Foster, similar to a couple of seasons ago when Jon Scheyer was getting set for year one, when it was only Jeremy Roach and Jalen Blakes who were carryovers from Coach K's last team to what Jon Scheyer was able to do in the first year. So definitely something probably to get used to in the years to come. Like, there are going to be years where, man, you really don't have a whole lot of familiar and similar faces carrying over from season to season.
No, but I think that's a good point that you bring up, in the fact that Jon Scheyer has been through this before. Now, granted, there was a lot more probably going on in his life in that first season as becoming a head coach and trying to navigate all that and learn the nuances of what he has to do. But certainly has to feel good for him knowing that he's been through a turnover like this, and having all these new guys come onto campus and try and put the pieces together and try to make them mesh well from the start of the season. Because as we've talked about throughout this summer, this is a Duke team that's jumping right into the deep end of the pool very quickly with their November non-conference schedule.
Really excited to see that schedule play out and to see the Duke team tested early and often throughout the course of the year. As Jon Scheyer was talking about with John Rothstein, something that got a lot of people excited talking scheduling, Kevin, it appears as though Duke would be open to kind of a home and home setting with UConn. UConn obviously has been the standard of college basketball the last 2 seasons, winning back-to-back national championships. The Duke program can say that themselves when you go back to 91-92 as UConn goes for the three-peat this season. But that'd be fun to watch, man, if we were somehow, some way able to kind of get a home and home set up with UConn.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing that a lot of fans want, both fan bases. And Jon Scheyer said, I think it was that first year, that he's going to be a lot more open to doing these home and home series than Coach K was. Obviously, Coach K was big on the neutral site games. And Jon Scheyer also, let's be honest, he is scheduling these neutral site games, continuing the Champions Classic, the game against Kansas in Las Vegas. But really one of the first things he did in terms of the schedule as a head coach was the home and home against Arizona. And I think I know there were conversations about a home and home with Kansas before, I guess, those talks kind of broke down and they're able to schedule the game out in Las Vegas. So it seems like Duke's not afraid to schedule home and homes with these big opponents. And, UConn and head coach Danny Hurley, they're not afraid to play anybody either. And they've certainly played in these big venues. You could call it road games, like going out to Spokane, even though it wasn't on Gonzaga's campus. I think it was played in the Seattle area close to where that campus is, just to have a bigger arena. I think it's interesting because also I think the big elephant in the room is both these programs call Madison Square Garden, for UConn a third home and for Duke a second home. So would they potentially want to meet up for a neutral site game at Madison Square Garden and see who can kind of take over New York City a little bit more? Because obviously UConn has 2 home venues already with their on-campus home and then the XL Center, which is in Hartford, Connecticut, about half-hour away from their campus. And then obviously Duke plays all their home games at Cameron Indoor Stadium. And for a game of this magnitude and this volume, it would be great to see a game played in Cameron Indoor Stadium for a home and home series. But I think you have to be a little bit more realistic in how much media attention this game would get, how many fans would want to attend this game, and perhaps maybe a bigger venue would be a better place to hold this game. And then also you have to get into the contract and the financials of it, of, okay, if it is going to be a neutral site game, who gets a portion of the pot? How much goes to UConn? How much goes to Duke? How much would have to go to Madison Square Garden for hosting a game of this magnitude? So I'll be honest, I don't know any of those intricacies of how contracts gets scheduled out and who takes home the money. But as a fan, and obviously we'd love to see a game like that get put on the schedule for next year or maybe even down the line.
We've seen so many great UConn Duke games over the years. It's just been a little bit since we've gotten one. And so to have one of those possibly in the near future is incredibly exciting. If it is home and home, I love that aspect to it as well. But to your point, if it is a neutral site game, if it's somewhere like Madison Square Garden and you could brag for who owns MSG, who owns New York City, as you just said, Kevin, that would be pretty exciting too. Because I think you look at Coach K's point in the neutral site games over the years, it's also something I think that's very real. Like, look, championships are won on neutral site courts. And so why not play as many top level games as you can on those neutral site courts? However, you look at the toughness, you look at what wins on true road games can do for your NCAA resume, you look at the fan turnout and just the all-in-all college environment that you can create by playing those true home and homes. I get that side too.
Yeah, and I think it's great for fan bases for having these home and homes, right? Because if you have, say, Duke in Connecticut, take the example of what we're talking about in Madison Square Garden, you don't get the Cameron Crazies there. Yes, you get the great Duke fan base in New York City there, but you don't have the Cameron Crazies that are 7 feet away from the floor. Same thing in Connecticut. If a game was in Connecticut, you're not going to have those Connecticut students that are right on the floor in the student section making that noise. And That's what we kind of want to see in college basketball, right? Because it feels like a lot of these big-time games are played on neutral site floors. And don't get me wrong, those are great, having those games in these big venues with these giant atmospheres. But kind of what we're seeing in college football in the conference realignment, how new schools are traveling to their different now conference opponents and playing on their home field.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool. And I think those in charge of college basketball are wanting more of those in the sport rather than some of these neutral site games.
Which we're okay with. We're absolutely okay with seeing those big-time games take place. And if Duke's able to play UConn, that would be awesome. Bring it, UConn. We want to see another fun matchup within the rivalry. All right, we're going to take our first time out here on the show today. On the other side, Jon Scheyer has spoken highly about what this Duke team can be defensively, also some recruiting notes and more that we want to give you here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at Roy. Duke fans, have you heard about Roy? It stands for Return on You, and it's a new platform that lets you, the fans, get involved in NIL like never before by making contributions directly to your favorite athletes. By supporting players directly, you can help shape rosters, retain talent, and keep your favorite athletes out of the transfer portal. As you all know, NIL has changed the game for athletes. Roy changes the NIL game for fans. Here's how Roy is different. It allows fans to directly back their favorite college athletes. With Roy, fans can play a key role in shaping the future of their favorite teams, while athletes maximize their name, image, and likeness potential. Download Roy for iOS or Android and enter referral code LOCKEDON, and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. Visit joinroy.com for additional details. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Get the Roy app for iOS or Android and start making an impact on your favorite team. Use referral code LOCKEDON again for an opportunity to win $5,000 cash. Visit joinroy.com for more details. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with Roy, a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Our show today is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is amazing. It's America's #1 sports book, and we talk about it so often. We've got something a little bit different for you for the rest of the week. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a free 3-week trial on NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with the YouTube TV base plan, you're going to be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All that you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Welcome back into the show here today. I'm JJ Jackson. He's Kevin Conley. You can follow him on X at KevinConley24. And Ball Durham is the place to find all of your Duke athletics news. Tell us a little bit about the website, Kevin.
Well, we got everything that you could possibly want. Duke basketball, Duke football. It's all over at balldurham.com. We got stuff daily, so come read us every day, balldurham.com.
Really excited to continue our conversation here today as we get closer to the start of the basketball season. Again, Jon Scheyer recently appeared on John Rothstein's College Hoops Today podcast, talking about what this team would be able to accomplish. He talked about the 10 new players joining Caleb Foster and Tyrese Proctor, and the size is something big that everyone wants to touch on. And look, every player on scholarship is 6'5" or taller. It's crazy how big our squad's going to be this season.
Yeah, and we've talked about this a little bit over the summer as well, and how this team feels like they have elite potential defensively. And you just look from the back on, or I should say the front court on, with Common Malawak and Cooper Flagg. Those are two guys. I mean, obviously Common, everyone knows what he could do defensively and how he can be a game changer around the rim. Cooper Flagg, obviously, I think his defensive game, as we talked about, is very underrated. Everyone talks about the shot making and shot creating and his offensive prowess, but his defense is really at an elite level as well. Interested to see how that translates to the college game. And then you look at the two guards and Caleb Foster and Tyrese Proctor, and we talked about how good Tyrese Proctor had been at shutting down the lead guard for the opposition, and you're only expecting that to continue and get better going into his junior season. And then for Caleb Foster, you're expecting that defensive jump from freshman year to sophomore year. And as you mentioned, he's the smallest player on the roster listed at 6'5" on a scholarship. So it really does feel like this team has elite potential defensively, and Jon Scheyer knows it. The common fan knows it. So it's going to be excited to see how they grow with each game as a defensive unit.
Yeah, he's talked a lot about the work ethic that's been put into place and the connectivity. And I think you hear that word connectivity in basketball, and it can go directly back to what we've been talking about throughout the course of our conversation here today, Kevin, and that's that they've had time in the gym already, right? Nothing is going to simulate in-game action against another opponent and whatnot, but getting to practice, not only getting into the offensive flow of things, but hey, switches, defending ball screens. Do you look at zone looks from time to time throughout the course of the season with this great size? I mean, that takes a lot of practice, and to be on one connective unit for Duke to truly be one of those great defensive teams.
Yeah, and that's what this time of the year is all for, like these offseason practices and workouts. You're trying to install things that you're going to implement and practice even more and get more in depth about it once the season really gets closer. So, yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see. I do expect this team to put a lot of pressure on their opponents, picking up full court, trying to get into their legs, get tired, because also we've talked about how we think this is going to be a deep team as well. So I think this is going to be a very aggressive defensive style that we see this season.
Asked about it directly, does Jon Scheyer think that this could be the best defensive squad he's had so far in his tenure as head coach? He said, quote, "I do think we have a chance to do that. We've got a long way to go, but we definitely have the making of the ability to guard the ball, protect the rim, cover ground with our size. So we'll be doing some things this year that we haven't done before, but the size on the floor, 1 through 5, is a great strength. I like having it as a coach. I'm not sure we could do that every year quite to that level, but it's been something that was very intentional on our part this year as we start to get going," end quote. So, yeah, man, this just gets me more excited to see them out there on the floor defensively, to see what kind of an impact they can have. And not only the size of Cooper Flagg and Common Malawak, but I think about the great defenders that Duke got in the transfer portal. When you think about Sion James, Gillis, and Malik Brown coming over as well.
Yeah, and that's obviously a lot of high praise for a team that hasn't played a game together, because when you look back at his first year with that team with Derek Lively and Kyle Filipowski down low, that was a pretty good defensive team in itself. So I think that's a lot of high praise for Jon Scheyer, talking about this group, thinking that these guys could be better than them, and obviously they haven't played a game yet.
All right, so talking about Duke basketball getting set for the upcoming season, it's also been forever since we've had some recruiting updates with this Duke basketball team. We're ready for that to change, and we're going to get to that in our final segment here on today's conversation. But one quick story we did want to touch on regarding members of the Brotherhood in the college basketball world. Nolan Smith has found his next stop, Kevin. Looks like he's on his way to join Penny Hardaway's staff at Memphis.
Yeah, really crazy story with Memphis. A ton of assistant coaches being fired and let go late into August, early September, and Penny Hardaway obviously trying to fill out that staff, and it picks up Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith obviously spent the past couple of years at Louisville with that coaching staff, and Kenny Payne getting fired. Nolan was still looking for a home, and he lands at Memphis. So we'll see if this Memphis team, there's a lot of questions about Penny Hardaway and how his style of coaching doesn't work in college. Can it hold up throughout a full season? Haven't seen that specifically last year. It was a Memphis team that got into the top 25 before the bottom really fell out. So we'll see if the Tigers can put something together this year with Nolan Smith now joining their staff.
Yeah, excited to see him back out there. Memphis has always been able to recruit, and as had Nolan Smith, and the relationships that he's able to build with players, just happy for him that he found that next stop there. Penny Hardaway now entering his 7th season at Memphis, and his press release said, quote, "Nolan is a grit and grind guy and one of the brightest young coaches in college basketball. He works hard and has a passion for the game that is unmatched, brings a championship mindset to our team after not only having won a national championship as a player, but also learning from one of the all-time greats in Mike Krzyzewski," end quote. So Nolan Smith, 6 seasons on staff at Duke following his time as a player, went to Louisville for 2 seasons with Kenny Payne, went 12-52. Just horrific, Kevin. seeing the number and that record on the screen again to kind of remind you how bad those Louisville teams were these last few years.
Yeah, it was tough. And that probably ate at Nolan. And at a certain point, you have to hear all the chatter and all the conversation about how bad Louisville has been. So happy for him, though, that he gets a fresh start at Memphis.
Yep. All right. Well, we're going to take our final timeout here on today's show. When we come back, we've got some of those recruiting updates for you. You are watching and listening to Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at GameTime. GameTime is the absolute best and now has a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. GameTime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. GameTime Picks has curation that makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater events, and so much more. They've got all-in pricing where we can toggle the feature to show the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You've got to turn on the feature so that you are able to do that. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and it's the lowest price guarantee, or GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? It's game time. Final few moments here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. I'm JJ Jackson. He's Kevin Conley, the site expert for Ball Durham. Duke basketball on the recruiting trail. It's been like 6 months since the Blue Devils have gotten a commitment of any kind, and everyone wants to continue to watch the Boozer twins and what decisions they will make. They had another round of unofficial visits, Kevin, and all 3 of those have been concluded, right?
Yeah, they're all wrapped up. Duke, Miami, and Florida. So now it just feels like it's a wait and see, and wait for that announcement to come from the Boozer twins. People have said it feels like it's Duke or Miami. Maybe Florida is out of the race, so it could have 2 ACC schools pitting up against each other for 2 of the most coveted recruits in the class of 2025.
So I hope that this goes in Duke's direction. As you said, it looks like maybe if you were to kind of narrow it down from the 3 to 2, a lot of people assume it's Duke and Miami that are in a good spot right now to land the Boozer twins, but it's easier said than done. We hope that Duke can pull off yet another massive recruiting win with one of the top players. Caden Lewis cuts his final list down to 4 schools, and Duke is still in it. A top 35 player in the country, a lefty, which I always love to watch play. And this is a player that Duke really would love to get on their campus.
Yeah, and it feels like Duke is in a good spot with them, but you look at the other 3 schools that they're competing against: UConn, North Carolina, and Kentucky. Now,
it's pretty good for him, man.
It is, and I feel like some people are still going to have to get used to seeing Kentucky in a recruiting battle with Duke and realizing it's no longer John Calipari. I'm still not completely sold on that myself. I still have to remind myself that it's now Mark Pope and not John Calipari. But it doesn't get much bluer than that in terms of 4 blue bloods for Caden Lewis with Duke, Kentucky, UConn, and North Carolina.
On the other side of things, Braylon Mullins cancels his visit to Duke. This was another kind of guard that Duke had interest in.
Yeah, I think he was in Duke was in his top 10 that it came out a couple of days ago. He's going to dwindle his finalist down to 5, and it seems like the 5 are pretty clear because he also canceled visits to Alabama and Tennessee, and he's not setting up dates for trips to Kansas or Purdue. So it really feels like his final 5 are probably going to be UConn, Michigan, North Carolina, Indiana, and I believe Kentucky will probably make it in that final 5 as well. So Duke bowing out of the race for Braylon Mullins, who really good shooter with good size, but he will not be in Durham.
And then another headline to keep you updated with. You could see all of these stories with more info at Ball Durham that Kevin and his team do a great job of covering. Koa Pete has postponed his official visit to Duke. So not an unofficial, it's an official. At least there's a postponement and not a cancellation, Kevin.
Yeah, you see these headlines all the time when you do get a little bit nervous. It was supposed to be this weekend that Koa Pete was supposed to be in Durham. Now it's postponed to the weekend of October 18th. So we'll see if anything good or bad comes from that. I do know it's never that good of a sign when you have a 5-star postponing an official visit to your school, but I think it's certainly good that they do have a date in mind already that they put it back on the calendar for. So don't have the specific details, but maybe something just came up that Koa wasn't able to travel to Durham this weekend, so he'll do it in a month's time.
In conclusion, man, I do think we're close. It's been a long while since Duke has gotten a recruitment, but I feel like we're close in terms of landing somebody over the next few weeks prior to the start of not only the Duke season, but the high school season as well. When you look at the class of 2025, I still feel relatively good about the Boozer twins. I mean, until it actually happens that they don't end up at Duke. I think a lot of people might feel that way, Kevin. And then Caden Lewis, I think Duke is in a really good spot there as well. But don't you just have a good feeling that maybe over these next few weeks, we're going to get some commitment?
Yeah, it does. It does feel like that. And the last high school commitment this team had that we talked about a couple of weeks ago was Common Malawak. So it has been about 6 months since they landed a high school prospect, a commitment from a high school prospect. And I do agree with you, JJ. It feels like within the next month, I would say, it feels like this team will have a commitment or two under their belts.
Let's make it happen. Let's see how it goes. Kevin, thank you for the time once again here today. Please go check out Ball Durham for all the great work that Kevin and his team do. And my friend, we will talk to you next week.
Can't wait, JJ. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's Kevin Conley joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Great insight from him as always. That's going to do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.